The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, even mine enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Though an host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. One thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in his temple. For in the time of trouble he shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret of his tabernacle shall he hide me. He shall set me up upon a rock. And now shall mine head be lifted up above mine enemies round about me. Therefore will I offer in his tabernacle sacrifices of joy. I will sing, yea, I will sing praises unto the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry with my voice. Have mercy also upon me, and answer me. When thou saidst, seek ye my face, my heart said unto thee, thy face, Lord, will I seek. Hide not thy face far from me. Put not thy servant away in anger. Thou hast been my help. Leave me not, neither forsake me, O God of my salvation. When my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up. Teach me thy way, O Lord, and lead me in a plain path because of mine enemies. Deliver me not over unto the will of mine enemies. For false witnesses are risen up against me, and such as breathe out cruelty. I had fainted unless I had believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord.
Thank you, Father, for being with us, for sending your great comforter, the Holy Spirit. Give us wisdom, insight into your word, discernment of every letter of your word, that we may gain in our understanding and come closer to you in the process, Father, as you increase our faith. In the name of the Son, Yeshua. Hallelujah. Episode 7c, the follow-up to the follow-up. We're still in Genesis 6. May take a little while to get out of it. There's too much to cover. So, real quickly, in a chronology of events, we go to the days of creation, chapter 1 and 2, creation of mankind, the subsequent creation of Eve, the seduction of Eve by the seraph, the declaration of war. I think it's very important to understand that the serpent, seraph, it's critically important to understand the serpent and seraph are the same. Declaration of war by God on these entities. There's many more than one, as we finally learned from Enoch, 200 that came down on Mount Hermon. The blood sacrifice of chapter 4, understanding the importance of the blood sacrifice. The layout of the gospel in chapter 5, that God writes out in the names of the patriarchs. Then we get to chapter 6, and we have this event where the 200 seraphs made this agreement with each other on Mount Hermon, and began corrupting the seed of mankind. We see the evidence of this on Mount Hermon. There's another issue I need to cover, the tribe of Dan. I want to get around to it. I don't know. It's maybe towards the end of this video, and it's going to end up having to be an entirely new video on the tribe of Dan. We'll explain that. So the beginning and the end, we have the beginning of this escalation of war, this corruption of the genetics of not only mankind but other species on earth, that happened on where they agreed to do this on Mount Hermon. And then we have Yeshua in the turning point of his ministry at Caesarea Philippi, where he's going to Jerusalem to be crucified after leaving Galilee, the Sea of Galilee. So now let's take a look at more evidence of things that are otherwise difficult to explain, if, people that don't understand what happened in Genesis 6. Let's take a look at more evidence of what happened in the pre-flood era, and how these entities were celebrated, which continues today. This has not ended. This didn't end with the flood. It didn't end with Abraham. It didn't end with any of the post-flood patriarchs. It continues today. They still work against us. They still plot against us today, these followers. And who was behind it? The initiator of all of this, the progenitor of these ancient monolithic structures around the world, Cyclopean architecture, it is called today, was the son of Cain, Enoch. So let's take a look at more. There's a lot more to cover. I think we can get through this one today a little bit quicker than the last one. And let's get started. So take a look at these pyramids now. Here's an excellent example of pre-flood, post-flood. So you look in the background, you see the Great Pyramids of Egypt, Giza. The pyramids in the back are pre-flood. These were built with the intelligence, just like we would build something today. You want to build a fabulous structure, you don't hire a rock mason to design it. You have an architect who does the designing and someone else who does the actual building. Well, this is exactly the way it worked back then. We had architects, which were the fallen angels, and the builders, which were their galactic misfit children. In the background you see what they were capable of, and in the foreground you see what man alone was capable of, is these little falling down ant piles in the front that did not stand the test of time. Those in the background stood the test of time. There's something interesting about the pyramid, and this is conjecture, like a lot of what I present, but based on common sense. So the mountain of God, these guys, now keep in mind, they were intending to usurp the throne of God. This was not just about conquering man on earth. It went much beyond that. They were intending to usurp the throne of God. As we'll see when we get into the Tower of Babel, and the true meaning, when we get to the story of Nimrod, the true meaning of Babel, which has not been clearly, people don't understand it because they don't understand the translations and the etymology of the word, where it comes from, where it originates. It was a stargate. Bab Ilu in ancient Sumerian was a stargate. They were intending to usurp the throne of God, and these pyramids were their mountains. When we talk about the holy mountain of God, wherever He is, I believe, but I don't know, that His holy mountain is something similar to one of these, and it's probably what was sitting in the Garden of Eden. I don't believe He was camped out among the trees. I think He had a very comfortable abode that is obviously capable of being able to travel very quickly across vast distances across space. But anyway, so the holy mountain of God, and it could be that the holy mountain of God is one thing, and transportation is totally something else. Back in the book of Enoch, I had mentioned that one of the reasons it's too wild and too difficult for people to believe was because he was in outer space looking down on Earth. Well, they picked him up and they took him in something, and he was in the presence of God. He writes about it in his book. People can't believe it. Doesn't mean it's not true. So there was a mode for travel that probably very closely resembled the mountain of God, whether it was the mountain of God or not. I believe that this is what these fallen angels were trying to duplicate in their disobedience, but beyond. It's much, much, much beyond disobedience. This is war, and this is about winning the war. And we'll look in a minute at how they celebrated it. But we talk about pre-flood architecture, and people are so confused by it and say that there's nothing that can explain it, etc. Well, this is how you explain it. We had the fallen angels were the architects. Their galactic misfit children were the builders. If you look at the average stone size of the Great Pyramids, they roughly were approximately 2 tons. Well, just imagine one of these guys being approximately, we have records of them being as much as 35 feet tall. I think some of them probably were even more than that. I mean, the back in the book of Numbers, in the post-flood era, even way past the flood, they said they were taller than the trees of Lebanon, which, the cedars of Lebanon, not just the trees, but the cedars of Lebanon, which the massive cedar of Lebanon is something more like a pine tree, and they were in excess of 35 feet tall. And they you see right there in the book of Numbers and in the Old Testament where these ancient Hebrews were witness to these Nephilim that exceeded the heights of the cedars. Well, you take a creature like that and a 2-ton block of stone. You put one of those guys on each end, maybe one by himself, pick up a 2-ton block of stone. I mean, what would be the mass of a being that size? I don't know, but let's say he's probably at least several tons in weight himself. Well, if I'm 195 pounds and I can easily manipulate a 100-pound sack of cement, these guys are, between 4,000 and 6,000 pounds probably in size. A block of stone, 4,000 or 5,000 pound block of stone between a couple of them. That's a simple rock mason job for these guys. So that's the way we need to understand this. There was architects and builders. The fallen angels were the architects. The Nephilim were the builders. Cyclopean architecture is what it's still called today. The reason is Cyclops. The ancient Cyclops. I don't know how many of them are one-eyed, but they say that the one-eyed entities I have read, as how much of this is true, who knows. But there's ancient lore that says that they had some kind of a strange ability to manipulate sound, because obviously with only one eye and a different sinus system, they had some large cavities inside their head that they were able to, like a whale, make noises similar like a whale. Who knows about that? That's all pretty strange. But bottom line is, architects and builders were in this time period after this this curse by imprecation on Mount Hermon between the 200 fallen angels, the corrupted genetics of mankind, and these monsters that spawned from that event were the builders, the ancient builders. Keep in mind, this lasted almost 2,000 years, a little over 1,700 years this went on. Now in the time of Enoch, by the way, if we look at when God left, if you go back in the biblical timeline that's laid out for us, it's about 1,000 years. So he left right about the end of the first day, the way God counts days, and that would also makes perfect sense. That would have been the first day, the first yawn, the first age, and then the second age was terminated. The third age would have been Abraham, and on and on and on. Anyway, so let's take a look at a few more of these, and then we'll look at something that's very important to understand: is who was a progenitor of. There was a human involved in this, and this is a reason that after the flood, they were all migrating from east to west. The Bible says they continued their journey west. And why was it west? Because where they landed, they needed to get back to the Middle East and re-kickstart their projects, they thought. So let's take a look at a few more of those. So here's an example of how we separate pre-flood versus post-flood construction and technology, is by the complexity, the sophistication, and the technology that would make the construction of this very difficult even by today's standards. Here's an example. This is a Sphinx, and this has been laid out with coordinates measuring machine, where you can see that the symmetry, I mean, this is obviously, not going to get down to a microscopic level, but just from what we can see here, the symmetry is perfect. This actually measured out to within I believe tens of thousands of an inch of perfection. If you create a center line right down the forehead, the nose, and the chin, the symmetry was perfect to within fractions of a thousandth of an inch. That, even by today's standards, especially something like this, where you've got way more than just, you've got quite a few different axes going on there to create something like this on a modern CNC machine, obviously couldn't be sculpted to this precision. So what was the technology that shaped this? We don't know. But it was something that existed. It was something that was brought in by these fallen angels from somewhere else. It wasn't even of this earth. It was from somewhere else. And we see this throughout the ancient world, the ancient pre-flood world. I'm going to look at a few examples, but when people are perplexed and they say this, this is impossible, etc., 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 it's not impossible. It was very possible. It was done with technology that doesn't exist today. That's what made it possible. Let's look at a few others. But that's how we separate this. That's how we create a distinction between pre-flood, post-flood, is by the complexity, the size, the manipulation of very large stones, some of them hundreds of tons in some cases, and cut and laid with precision. How was this done? Well, obviously it was something that these guys brought in with them. But this is who did it. This is the point of understanding. These were the guys responsible for this pre-flood technology. And all of it was while they ruled for a time, because, Satan had usurped Adam from his lordship over the earth. These guys all reported to Satan, to Lucifer. And so they ruled for a time. But when they crossed the line, when they started manipulating God's genetic DNA, the makeup, the DNA of creation, that's when he, he knew what he was going to do beforehand, but this is when he shut it down. Let's look at a few more, and then I want to move on into how the monuments that they created or had created for themselves to celebrate what they thought they had won the battle with God. When you see these precision cuts like this one in granite, here's one that shows that they were using something that turned and cut at the same time, probably diamond tipped, or something of not even of this world probably. And people get so confused as to how it was done back then. It's just a matter of understanding that these individuals were way advanced, way farther advanced than we were. Even in modern Egyptology, they'll show you some copper hammers and chisels and say this is how they did all of this. Yeah, good, right. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, look at the cuts on this. It wasn't done with a hammer and chisel. It was done with some technology that today could be done, but how was it done 5,000 years ago? And it was with some tools that they had brought in, something that these guys had brought in. Something, you find evidence of things that it would even be difficult today. So whatever they had was a very superior technology. They brought it in from somewhere else. It wasn't even of this earth. Somebody asked me once what I thought about all of this alien stuff. And I said, well, do you believe in God? Well, yeah, but what does that have to do with aliens? Well, you think God's from here? God's not from here, and neither are any of these guys. Neither were any of these fallen angels that are now being looked back upon as gods. Well, they were gods, but not with a capital G. These were much lesser gods. They were created by the Most High God and His Son. Okay, let's look at a few more. This is when I'm researching this is the kind of stuff I look for to determine if it's pre-flood or post-flood. When you see something that was obviously machine cut, you can even still see the tool marks in the granite. This is obviously pre-flood. If it's post-flood, such as this one carved in sandstone, you can see, even though this is very, very high quality, it's carved in sandstone and it's not perfect. You can see the little imperfections in it. By the way, take a look at that in the very center of that photo, that symbol of That's the ancient symbol of a cross, which was indicated as a key to the afterlife. This is one of the reasons, even though I know that crucifixion was done on a cross in Roman times, I don't believe that Yeshua was crucified on a cross. I believe he was crucified on a tree, just like the Bible says. He was hung from a beam on a tree. That image to the left there is, we'll get into more of these. There's a lot of symbology here that has carried forward all the way to today in various religions and cults and secret societies. I don't know how much time we're going to dedicate to that, but some of it is important to know. But let's take a look at a few of these examples of post-flood, pre-flood. This is another example of something that would be post-flood, because first of all, it's done in a type of stone that has not weathered well over time. Second of all, you can see that it's not machine cut. It's hand engraved, and while the detail is very good, very talented, it's not something that couldn't be duplicated very easily today. When you get into where we know that there was highly sophisticated technology of the era, is when you see things like this. You know, a capstone with extreme precision just in the geometry, much less in the detail of the engraving. The geometry itself is perfect. Or something like this, where they use a light gauge to look for variations in the cutting, and there are none. You know, it's just there's no mistakes in whatever you were using to cut it with was perfect. And when there's some that, you know, obviously there's some that are much better examples than this. I just want to throw this in there so you get an idea. And then I want to, because we have to understand, you know, there's a lot of deceptions, and this whole ancient aliens thing on the History Channel just kind of burns me sometimes. But this was fallen angels. They were the architects. The galactic misfits were the builders. And sometimes you see pre-flood and post-flood both in the same construction, because some of it was done before the flood, and perhaps either something happened to it or it wasn't finished. And then, you know, in the case like this, where the Romans come along and finish it out or rebuild it with post-flood technology of that era, you can see the difference. Look at the stones at the bottom versus the stones on the top. These were done, you know, thousands of years apart from each other, with different architects and different builders. It's pretty obvious, really, where these people are walking. This is another example of Cyclopean architecture, but then look slightly, you know, high and to the right of them. That's Roman architecture. The Romans finished it out, or that those pieces laying on the ground there, those were done well after the flood, way beyond the flood. So that's the easiest way to tell, and it confuses people because they're looking at one particular structure and think it was all built at the same time. No, part of it was built at one time period, the rest of it built at another time period, and then the guys at the later time period got the credit for the construction and the architecture. Going back to Mount Hermon, for example, I mean, just because of a construction like this that can easily be attributed to the Greeks or Romans, it was the Romans, but could be attributed to either, because that is there and is obvious evidence of the Romans' interest in Mount Hermon. Because that is there, then we'll walk over to, you know, one of these, what I kind of believe were altars. You know, in a way, I'm gonna throw something out here that, you know, I get off on some wild stuff sometimes. Everybody knows that, but listen to this. I think that these fallen angels weren't roaming around picking up women and doing their thing. They were having them brought to them. Now remember, they thought of themselves as gods. They were intending to usurp the throne. I don't think they ever exerted much effort. They had things done for them. And I believe these altars are where they had human women brought to them by, you know, obviously by the thousands, and did this thing, this corruption of the genetics of mankind. And I think that that's what these altars were for. That's the reason they look like altars. It's where they were doing this. But that's off the subject. On the subject is, just because this temple, this other temple, is there that is obvious Roman architecture and construction, then here's another one that we say was attributed to the Romans at the same time period. That's just insane. It makes absolutely no sense at all. You can look at it and see that obviously two different people built these things. One was built by one at a totally different time period than the other, and with totally different techniques and technology. So, anyhow, I think that's probably enough on that subject. You get the idea, you get the point. There were architects and builders, masterminds and physical force, and the combination of the two built some, really unique stuff around the world that has not been duplicated since. Then when you look at the similarity of the construction in places around the world with extreme distance between them, look at this, for example, Peru and Egypt, slightly different, but basically, I think the same people built it. Or in cases like this, there was an additional technology that actually shaped the stone rather than cut it. If you look at Machu Picchu and the way that the construction was done there, it's like these stones were actually molded together somehow. Perhaps got them hot enough to be able to shape them. I don't know. I mean, we really don't know, but what we know is that it was done in this time period, and that's the point of explaining this. It was done in this time period. We know who the architects were. We know who the builders were because we understand Genesis 6. The whole point of me doing this is so that we understand Genesis 6. They're going to be crediting, if you watch these programs, they're going to be crediting intelligent other life forms from other planets that were the gods of antiquity. Well, they're fallen angels, plain and simple. We don't want to be stupid about it because we know better. So that's the point of me doing this, and I want to get on with some other things here. I'm not going to go through hundreds of these, but I want you to see a few of them to understand it's the time period. It's the fallen angel time period. They were combining cross species. In other words, humans with crocodiles. Look at this creature here. Looked like, I don't know, bear's feet or something in the back. By the way, he's got 6 toes, and looked like dog feet or maybe leopard. I guess it's a leopard in the front, some kind of cat, a crocodile head, and whatever this is in front of him with the bird head on a human body. This was happening. This is why God wiped it out. They were going across species and combining things. Now, how they did it, we have no idea, but keep in mind, they understood. They were, that's the reason they were looked upon as gods. They had the ability to do these things. I don't know how they did it, but that's why they were looked upon as gods and worshipped as gods. And they were wanting to be worshipped as gods. So I don't want to dwell a whole lot on this. You get the idea. Cross species. Let's look at a couple more, just to get the point across. When we get into Greek mythology, we find that this is just an extension of the very same fallen angel story, carried by a different people, and those people I'm going to explain in another video because it won't be time in this one. It came from the tribe of Dan, the missing tribe of Revelation that was one of the 12 tribes of Israel, of the sons of Jacob in Genesis 49, and Revelation 7. The tribe of Dan and Ephraim are all of a sudden, they're not there. There's a reason for that. They had gone to idolatry, and I'm going to get into some of that in the next video, a portion of it in this video, where the city of Dan was because of the tribe of Dan, who had settled at Mount Hermon for the very same reasons that we're looking at here. It's the reason they were excluded from the inheritance of Israel was because they had been cut out of the 12 tribes because they had fallen to idolatry. So the Danois and the Danites, and you'll see other tribes of names of Dan around the world, Denmark, for example. This is an amazing story, and I'm going to have to go into another video with it because there's too much information for this one. But that's how Greek mythology became Greek mythology. Is the very same fallen angel story carried to Macedonia, which, by the way, the Don in Macedonia comes from Dan. They were the Danites of Israel, tribe of Dan of Israel. This is how Greek mythology became Greek mythology. It was carried over by the tribe of Dan. And probably, like a good story goes, some of it was exaggerated, I'm sure. But what we find is that there's a number of, there's actually a multitude of Hebrew words in the Greek language that actually have phonetically Hebrew origins, like in a lot of other places around the world. For example, Hercules comes from the verb rakal, which was a Hebrew word for traders. The Heracles were Hercules was the descendants of the Heracles, which were the traders. Traders meaning sea trade. They were sea merchants. They roam. They were some of the greatest mariners of the time that are kind of confused with the Phoenicians. They traveled with the Phoenicians and they went to the same places as the Phoenicians, but the ancient tribe of Dan was actually the first great sea merchants of the world. So, there's so many things that we don't know. But anyway, that's a little bit off the point. I want to get into that in another video. But just to be clear, how this information, why is there so much similarity between Greek mythology and the fallen angel story? Well, because it's the same story. It came from a tribe of Israel. So it's when we go into the origins of things, whether it be the word or the history of a people or the history of a place, we begin to learn everything. We got to go back to the beginning to understand present day, why we are where we are today. And that's what I'm trying to do in these videos, and this research is correct the record, get things straightened out. We need to know the truth of things that happen, because they're going to happen again. If we don't understand history, then we get caught up in certain traps that have already been played out before on other peoples. We don't want to get caught up in the same traps. And so the bottom line is that this was real. This is not mythology. This all really happened. And it's the reason that people are so fascinated and trying to find these gods again that have been locked up. God has put them away, at least the ones that had corrupted creation. They've been locked away. There are still fallen angels roaming that have not violated certain laws to the point that they were hauled away and locked up. But that's the reason that so many people were confused around the world, and so many different religions spawned after these stories of these fallen angels, which were worshipped as gods. There are religions that are, totally manufactured and created, such as Islam. Islam is one of them. It was actually created by the Catholic Church. We'll get into that at some point. It was at the fall of Rome, and Rome losing its power, and Christianity falling apart, and they actually created, it's a whole other story. I don't want to get too long in this, but let's take a look now at how these entities were worshipped. I believe that they wanted to be worshipped as gods, but also how they celebrated, and how this continues today. So what do you suppose is the risk of living in spiritual darkness for roughly 1700 years? Let's go back to the time of Emperor Constantine of Rome, when the mixing of religions began and Christianity began to get diluted out with paganism, which we still celebrate pagan traditions today that come from ancient Rome, mostly thanks to ignorance and deceptions that have been perpetuated by Roman Catholicism and other things. There's Satanism, there's other avenues for deception. It's not just the Catholic Church, although they have participated in really contaminating Christianity. What is the risk of this 1700 years of living in ignorance, and then willingly continue to remain attached to this Sethite story because it's prettier? It's a much prettier story. It's so much more pleasant to talk about the Sethites and the beautiful daughters of Cain and how this became the source of God's wrath, that he destroyed the planet. Oh, that's a much prettier story. The truth is really ugly. But I mean, what are we going to do? We're just going to keep our head in the sand? Meanwhile, that the Satanists that surround us and that run the planet continue to do what they do, knowing that we don't know any better, knowing that we sit here in spiritual darkness. For myself, I guess, because I know people that want to continue to live in ignorance, and that's why I guess I sound like I'm frustrated, because I am. They don't want to know these things. They want to dispute it. This can't be real. This can't be true. This is not what my church believes. This is not what, here's the risk. All right. So I'm going to explain. Let's take a look at a couple things here. And I want to get through this. I want to get past it because it is ugly. So I just want to get over it. I want to just, it's like when I had my cancer surgery. It's not that I want to go to the hospital, but, I got to get that cancer out of me. It's very similar to that. Here's the issue. The obelisk is the monument that was erected pre-flood and perpetuated after the flood to commemorate the event of the genetic corruption of mankind. This is a male phallus symbol, originally intended to represent the success of the fallen angels in their corruption of the genetics of not just mankind but other species across the planet that caused God to choose Noah to pull pure species of every beast of creation that God had created, had them pull them out and put them on the ark and rescue them, because everything had been corrupt. All flesh was corrupt. The phallus symbol was the monument that they built for themselves. Now we can kind of tell which ones are pre-flood, which ones are post-flood, although I am a little bit perplexed by some that I had originally thought were pre-flood, but then the translation of the hieroglyphics come out post-flood. So I think what happened there, I believe that they were carved and laying on the ground, probably. Hieroglyphics incomplete, and after the flood they were completed and erected, so that because the very old ones, the oldest ones that we know of, around 3500 BC, I assumed were fabricated before the flood, and I still believe that they were. I just don't think that they were finished until after the flood. And I think they were finished by the peoples that migrated west from the east at the location of the ark's resting, over time. This is not something that happened overnight. It was hundreds of years. But anyway, so this actually, most of these engravings I'll show you in a second are commemorating I say Nimrod. It was the deity, the deified Nimrod, who married his wife, who was also his mother, and they had this baby Tammuz. And Tammuz, this is what Easter and the Christmas tree and all of these traditions that we carry on today are all related to that. And this is something else we need to get to and get past. We need to bury those traditions. They're rooted in paganism, and they're really bad. And this is the problem with spiritual darkness. This is the problem with remaining in ignorance for 1700 years. You do stupid things because you don't know any better. Once you know better, you're going to have to confront it. So what is the risk of some of this? Well, let's take a look. This obelisk is in New York City. It was a gift back in the late 1800s from Egypt. I don't remember the guy's name at the time that gifted them to us. It had something to do with the War of the Nile. But and so there's 3 of these. There's 2 that came from Heliopolis, which is I believe that's Cairo. 2 of them came from ancient Heliopolis, and you'll see that name appears in the Bible as Beth Shemeth, which I'll point out in just a second. This one is in New York City. The sister to it, there was 2 of them. They call them the Cleopatra's Needle. There's two of them that were both there at the city of Heliopolis. The other one is in London. There's a third one that came from another, I believe, I don't remember where the other one came from. But anyway, there's a third one in Paris, which, by the way, I'm glad I remember this. Do you know that the originally meantime was changed to London from Paris, but do you know that Paris is on the 33rd parallel, as is Mount Hermon, also on the 33rd parallel, as is Roswell, New Mexico. Now, what those three things have in common, I have no idea, but I think that's very peculiar. So, anyway, that's kind of beside the point. I want to show these obelisks because this male phallus symbol, as hideous as it may be, I'm going to show you a problem with it. In about 1960, which is strangely when a lot of things changed, the King James Version of the Bible, there's a lot of things that really began to change. In the 60s, they started taking, in the 60s and 70s, prayer coming out of public schools. I mean, we all know what happened in the 60s and 70s. It was horrible. And how we would like to go back to those days today, as horrible as things are today. But here's a translation from, there's four faces, each say something a little bit different, but all dedicated to, well, various things. But let me read you one of them so you get the idea. So, the crowned Horus, that's post-flood. Horus, Nimrod, Semiramis, Tammuz, all of that is post-flood. That's all the same family. That's the whole Babylonian, the mystery Babylon, the traditions that continue today that were a result of the first rebellion against God after the flood. This is who they're talking about when they say Horus. And the eye of Horus is on the dollar bill. I mean, we're totally saturated in all these occult symbols. Totally saturated. Let me read this to you. The crowned Horus, bull of victory, arisen in Thebes, the lord of the vulture and uraeus crowns, prolonged as to kingdom, even as the sun in the heavens, by Tum, lord of On, begotten. I believe we're talking about fallen angel there. Son of his loins, who hath been fashioned by thought. So, son of his loins, who hath been fashioned. See, we're getting into this corrupted seed thing again here. Whom they created in the great temple with the perfections of their flesh. I'm telling you, this is what happened on Mount Hermon. This is exactly what happened. Now, I don't know specifically what they're referring to here, but this is the reason that we have to be careful with this whole phallus symbol thing that has been spread all over the world now by Freemasonry. These hieroglyphics, I mean, this goes. I'm going to show you what God says about these, how he feels about these things here in just a second. Whom they created in the great temple with the perfections of their flesh, knowing that he was. Anyway, you can read that if you want. I'm not going to read it. It's disgusting. But so this stuff is all over the world. They have pulled them out of Egypt. Why would they go to the trouble to pull something like this away from its origin and spread them around the world? There's Istanbul, from the region of, or city of Karnak in Egypt. There's London, Paris, all the major cities of the world. And where they don't have their own Egyptian granite, this is granite, by the way, which is what really leads me to believe it's pre-flood, because there's sandstone obelisk and there's granite obelisk. The sandstone is post-flood, the granite is pre-flood. But some of these must have remained uninscribed before the flood, that were reinscribed, or the inscriptions were completed after the flood, so that the wording could be dedicated to this, Nimrod guy. Nimrod and Semiramis and all of that really weird story that we're going to get to here pretty soon. So we've got these pillars, these monuments in Christian countries around the world. I don't think God is really... well, let's take a look and I'll show you what God thinks about it precisely. Deuteronomy 16, verses 21 and 22, Thou shalt not plant thee a grove of any trees near unto the altar of the Lord thy God, which thou shalt make thee, neither shalt thou set up any image. If you go into Strong's on that verse, it says pillar and not image. The King James says image because I believe the image, I don't think it's an inaccurate translation. I think it's accurate. The image was the phallus symbol. Do not set thee up any images of phallus symbols. I think we could very easily replace this pillar with that translation. It would be exactly correct. Which the Lord thy God hateth. He hates this. He hates this. He despises this, because this was something that became a tradition that has its roots and its origins in this fallen angel escalation of war against him. He hates this thing that they did. Exodus 23:24, You shall not worship their gods, nor serve them, nor do according to their deeds, but you shall utterly overthrow them and break their sacred pillars in pieces. That's what God wants done with these obelisks that we're picking up, carefully relocating from this origin, from the source of its corruption, from its corrupted beginning, and planting it in New York and in London and in Paris and in all these beautiful cities around the world. We want these beautiful pillars dedicated to false gods. Jeremiah 43:13, He will also shatter the obelisk of Heliopolis. Okay, we've got two. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is how ignorant we've become. Mankind is in the dark. We don't know God. That's why I'm doing these videos, knowing God, knowing God. We have to know God, and part of knowing God is knowing His enemy. Jeremiah 43:13, He will also shatter the obelisk of Heliopolis. I'm waiting for that to happen on these two. The one that's in the sisters that are from Heliopolis. One is in New York, the other one's in London, which is in the land of Egypt, and the temples of the gods of Egypt He will burn with fire. Hallelujah. Burn them, please. Get rid of them. That's how God feels about this, you know. And here we are spreading these things around. Now, what's worse? Can it get worse than this? Yes, it can. This obelisk is at St. Peter's Square at the Vatican. To make things worse, to really make God angry, they put a cross on top of it. And it came from the same city, this city referred to as the city of On in the Bible. Heliopolis, Beth Shemeth is another name for it. That's God of On. It was in that previous hieroglyphic translation that I was reading. I don't know what his story is, where he's from. I think he's of pre-flood origin. I don't know whether he's Nephilim or what, but that's why these obelisks are coming from that place, Heliopolis, the city of On. I don't know what On's story is. Maybe I'll find out someday. I'm going to continue researching it when I get the time. I've got a lot of different research projects going on simultaneously, in addition to several hundred pages of notes over the last several years that I go through to compile these videos. But there's something to this that is of pre-flood origin, and I want to show you in a second. We're going to talk about the evil Enoch, son of Cain. That's the reason that all of this happened. Well, I think that the fallen angels are the reason it happened, but he had something to do with building the cities there. He followed the fallen angels to those cities, or built those cities, took people to those cities. Anyway, this is the Vatican. Now it gets worse. So we have the male phallus symbol, this obelisk that came from Heliopolis. This symbol that we discussed in a previous video, in the mark of Cain, in the center there we have, this is the male and female thing. This whole thing is sexual, but in addition to that, there's the wheel of the sun. I don't know what these quadrants mean exactly. I have read it. It's somewhere I've read it before, but I don't recall. But these quadrants, these 8 spaces, form something else that is significant. But this is the wheel of the sun. The sun god worship. the male female, this the which went from pre-flood to becoming the Nimrod, which was Horus, his wife and mother Semiramis, and their child Tammuz, which was the Christ. This was, Semiramis became the Queen of Heaven. All of these statues that we see around Rome are of Semiramis and Tammuz that just, at the time of Constantine just became Mother Mary and baby Jesus, but actually the origins are much, they go back to Semiramis and Tammuz. So, if we don't clean this mess up, if there's any devout Catholics listening to this video, I feel for you, because this kind of stuff, man, I'm telling you, I just don't see any Catholics making the rapture. Now, I think a lot of Catholics are going to get out of the tribulation. I don't see any Catholics being raptured when we allow this to continue. But hold on, because, it may get ugly for everybody. Let's take a look at something else. Not to be outdone by the Vatican or the Egyptians or anyone else, the Freemasons of the United States of America have had to make sure that we have the largest male phallus symbol of all around the world, in honor of our great government. Yeah. So, it's this should never have been built, and if it was built, it should have been torn down. But because we've been kept in spiritual blindness for the last 1700 or so years, since the time of Constantine, Emperor Constantine of Rome, who we're going to get around to talking about him when we get the story of Nimrod, it's going to evolve into several videos itself as well. Since that time, we're in spiritual blindness, and this is the result. This is a result of accepting inaccurate doctrines, false. This whole Sethite theory is a false doctrine, and it's very unfortunate, but it happened. So but we got to deal with it. We got to put this stuff behind us. Now, if somebody wants to go pull monuments down, they want to pull this one down, I'll go help them. But this one needs to come down. This is a bad one. It's the largest one in the world, 555 feet tall, 55 feet in diameter at its base. That's the way that they're built. They have to be 10 times as high as their width. And fortunately, there's no inscriptions dedicated to the Ra, the sun god, or On, the god, or the product of his loins. Fortunately, there's no inscriptions like that on here. There's no telling what's on the inside of it, but fortunately, that's not here. However, the symbology of the Freemasons, the whole city is covered up in symbology. If you look right across there at the Capitol building, supposedly the dome of the Capitol is, the pregnant Semiramis, and the whole thing is just disgusting. But anyway, take one more look at one more thing that compares to the way that the obelisk at the Vatican was laid out. It's done the same way here with Washington Monument. In this aerial view of the monument, you can see where they've created these walkways which form two circles on either side of the phallus symbol, with the circle in the middle, and they come together. This is a whole other male-female thing. It all goes back to the obelisk of ancient Egypt, goes back to pre-flood times. It carried over into post-flood times through Nimrod, Semiramis, and we'll get into more of that later. But so now you know that the obelisk is not just, this became a tourist attraction, a tourist destination, because people are ignorant. They don't know what this stuff is about. But the obelisk was a commemoration of the fallen angel event that began with an agreement, imprecation by mutual curse for failing to keep the agreement with each other, that they were going to corrupt the human race. And this was the symbol dedicated to that event. And we still celebrate it today in our spiritual blindness. All right, let's get on with some more of this. I want to talk a little bit about Enoch, the evil Enoch. So let's talk about him, and I've got maybe one or two other things to go over, and we'll call it call it good on this video. So who are these people dragging around these male phallus symbol monuments commemorating the acts of defiant fallen angels escalating a war with God, corrupting the genetics of mankind, being worshipped by not only ancient civilizations, but right here in our own country, right here in the present modern day around the world? We have this enigma. Who are these people? What is this what is going on? I mean, look at their symbolism here. This is their logo. By the way, this is another, I don't want to draw too many pictures for you, but this is another, has sexual connotations, their logo. And they have penetrated every aspect of our society. I mean, they built this monument right there in Washington, D.C. before our eyes. We really don't know what's going on. They have penetrated every aspect of society, including our currency. You can read here, and right on the back of your dollar bill, you see this pyramid, the all-seeing eye of Horus. In Latin, there at the top is, I think it's something like "He who watches over us" or something like that. The New World Order. I think it's the New Order of the Ages is how that translates there at the bottom. I mean, these people run everything. Who are they? They're Satan's operatives in the world, but where did they come from? Why, what's going on? To find the answer to that, we got to go back to Genesis 4. Let's take a look at something, and I'll show you what these people believe. Now, doesn't mean it's true. I'm just telling you it's what they believe. And they have gone a long way with this. They're in every aspect of civilization today, every aspect of leadership around the world, the banking systems. Basically everything that we do is controlled by this and other secret society groups of individuals around the world. It's estimated that there are around 8,000 of them. And I'm going to show you some faces of a few of them. But let's take a look at where this originates. Let's go back to Genesis 4, verses 17 through 22. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch, and he builded a city, and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. And unto Enoch was born Ared begat. Goes on through here, Lamech, and his brother's name was Jabal, and so Zillah bore Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. The sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. All of these individuals, well, not all of them, but Naamah, Tubal-Cain, Enoch, all of these go back to the time at which the days of Jared began. Remember at the end of this chapter, the correct translation at that time, men began to profane the name of God. This I believe marks the beginning. The end of chapter 4 marks the beginning of the days of Jared. So this Enoch, though, according to these people that are transporting ancient pyramids around the world and putting them up in front of the Vatican, in front of Washington, right there in the capital of the United States of America, London, Paris, all the major capitals of the world, we have these things being picked up and moved out of Egypt and placed at strategic points around the world. What is it that they think that they know? Well, by their own testimony, by their own admission, they believe that Enoch, these are the Freemasons. The Freemasons are who have perpetuated this. There's a connection between, everybody's heard of the Illuminati and all of this. There's a connection between these groups of people. I believe some of them are operatives, there are bankers, they participate in everything that maintains global power. Of course, for Satan. And by the way, anytime you see where you'll see these Masonic symbols and it'll say, like on the dollar bill, "In God we trust." What God? Remember in the last video, the same, by command of the great and holy God, from here proceed those who keep the oath. That God? Yeah, exactly. That God. That's who they believe in. We have to be cognizant of this. These are the enemies of the Most High God, Yahuwah. And I'll explain at some point why I say Hallelujah, Yahuwah. I'll explain in another video. And because it's important to understand. It's important to differentiate between their God and ours. So this guy Enoch, he is proclaimed to be the first Mason. I believe that Enoch is, okay, so he's accredited by these individuals. Whether it's true or not, I'm just telling you the history that they believe. He's accredited with being the inventor of hieroglyphics. He believed in trying to keep a secret language among themselves that could be passed down through generations, where he had gotten his hands on what are supposedly the 7 sacred sciences, and was the one building these cities around the world, including the Egyptian cities where the Great Pyramids are located, and other places around the world, probably Atlantis. These are the cities he was involved in, and he had the help of the fallen angels, because obviously there were God's people, the Most High God, and then Satan's people, and the fallen angels worked for Satan's people, or worked with Satan's people. I mean, how do you expect that at the very same time, by the way, for those who continue to want to maintain that Adam was the first man and that every human being on the planet is a descendant of Adam, at the very same time that these guys are learning metallurgy and music, I mean the harp and the organ, we're talking 5,700 years ago. At the very same time this is going on, are we supposed to believe that the sons of Cain's cousins are on another continent chopping out stone arrowheads to chase down a buffalo? I mean, that makes absolutely no sense. That if they're related, and by the way, I mean, I've got arrowheads in my possession that are dated at 6,000 years. So, I mean, are we expected to believe? Anyway, I've already been over all of that. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole again, but it makes no sense. So these guys had the help of the fallen angels. They were learning metallurgy, music. They were building cities. They were populating the earth, trying to populate the earth at a faster pace than the line of Seth, by the way. Let's take a look at a couple of things here to help me explain this, so that you don't think I'm making anything up. This is directly from their encyclopedia, from the Mason Dictionary. Freemason, derived from the ancient Egyptian free, the sun, and mas, a child, free mas, i.e. children of the sun or sons of light. From this we get our word Freemason. I'm not making this up. This is what they call themselves, the sons of light. Sons of what light? Remember, Lucifer appears as an angel of light. And children of the sun. So the sun worship is tied to really the sun worship. I think it may have been, well, actually, yes, they do believe that Enoch, the son of Cain, we got to keep those two Enochs sorted. They're not the one and the same. The two different Enochs, and this is the bad one we're talking about. He also started some sun worship that I believe there's something in the sun that has to do with these fallen angels that I don't understand. But we see it so prevalent in their in what they believe, and again, this has permeated some very conspicuous places, predominantly the Catholic Church, which is what leads me to believe that the Vatican. So there's an order. We'll discuss it at a later date. I don't want to get into it here, but there's where the popes are chosen from, or basically that's a group of people that I think have more control over the direction of the planet than anyone else. There's about 200 of them. They're called the Black Popes. There's a close relationship between these Freemasons, Illuminati, and that group. And you'll see evidence of it that trickles down. It's not just maintained up at the upper echelon levels. You'll see it throughout take a look here at a couple of pieces of evidence. These are on local parish levels. This is not the Vatican. This is somewhere much lower, at a much lower level. Do you see anything conspicuous about these? By the way, this this headdress that is worn goes back to Nineveh, which we'll get into. Remember Jonah trying to go back and save Nineveh, and he was trying to avoid the mission. If you don't know the Jonah story, it's incredibly interesting. We'll get into that hopefully at some point. But this goes back to the god Dagon, the fish god. All of these are faces of Lucifer. It's all about misdirecting us, getting us away from God. But anyway, that's where this headdress comes from, is from Nineveh. So there's all kinds of things wrong with Catholicism. I don't want to dwell on it. But I mean, just look right here in front of us. We have all these Masonic symbols. The obelisk and right in front of the Vatican. I mean, all over the place there's Masonic symbols. And by their own definition, they don't believe in God. They believe they're children of the sun. So make no mistake about it. They know what they're doing. And this is not something specific to a time period of 3,500 to 5,000 years ago. This is modern day. This is present day. They continue to worship these deities, these fallen angel deities, and the deifications of Nimrod, Semiramis, and that whole story, which we'll get into later, which was really the origins of Roman Catholicism. Because Roman Catholicism, you have to remember, we'll explain at some point in greater detail, but the religion of Christianity was corrupted by the mixing of this ancient Babylonian, which is basically gets right back into this Freemasonry, the mixing of the Freemason gods with Christianity, with the Jewish God, the God of the Sethites. It's a mixing of the two, and that's the reason it's so confusing, but also the reason that it's so corrupt. So anyway, all right, let's take a look now. Just a couple of things I want to get on with before we close here, and I think we'll wrap it up. All right, I had promised, and people are asking me about when am I going to get around to explaining demons. Demonology and the origin of demons are two different things. I want to start. Eventually, I'll do an entire video on demonology, but I want to start with explaining that I hope that we understand by now that the result of the fallen angels and their mission to corrupt the genetics of mankind by planting their seed in mankind, to prevent God from being able to come through as the Messiah, come through as a man, and elevate man to the rank above angels. We have authority over all things through the Son of God, who died and rose from the dead for us. We have authority over all things through him. This is what they were trying to prevent. They did not want that to happen. At the end of this video, I'm going to explain one more thing about the sons of God and who we are in all of this. Look at this guy right here. Now his spirit is roaming the earth somewhere. He was an illegal hybrid. He was an offspring of an event that was not ordained by God. It was not permitted by God. It was an act of disobedience. It was an act of war against God. Their spirits are roaming the earth. And we learn a lot about this from, thank God for the book of Jubilees that it survived, because there's a good explanation in chapter 10 that we're going to go over. When I get to demonology, in the meantime, I want you to know a few things. So we have to keep these doors closed to these entities that seek only to destroy us. There's a synchronization between the living and the dead, these being the dead. Their spirits are roaming the earth, but the living, these Freemasons, and all of this comes together through worshipers of Satan, and whether or not they even know that they're worshiping Satan. By the way, I need to go over a couple more. I had mentioned, I hope you remember, I said you can't trust your doctor, your financial advisor, and you can't trust every pastor. I'm going to show you a few things about a few people that are very high-ranking Freemasons. I want to do that when let me finish this about the origin of demons, and then we'll get into that. Let's just jump in. I want to read from Jubilees. Oh, first I wanted to explain. So, don't open the doors and windows for these guys. And the way that you do that is by any form of idolatry. I don't care what it is, any form of idolatry, but especially if it's a religious relic. Bowing to the Virgin Mary, bowing to Buddha, bowing to anything other than the Most High God in the name of His Son is idolatry, and very dangerous idolatry. And this opens the door for them to come in. But there's, of course, other things, acts of disobedience, participating in basically anything that is illegal, anything that goes against the commandments of God is a characterization of His enemy. So the way that we know the behavior of God's enemy is by the laws that He wrote that describe their activity that He wants us to circumvent, He wants us to avoid. And when we engage in those acts of disobedience or sin, we have to stay in atonement for that, or we become like them. We become like His enemy. So the whole purpose of atonement is not to become like the enemy of God. So astrology, in total innocence, you might get up in the morning and check your horoscope. You just opened a door or a window for demons to come into your life. These are the things we have to avoid. Stupid things that have nothing to do with God. The witchcraft and things that go on, we have power over all of that. But we can't open the door for it to come into our life. We'll get into more of that. I don't want to tie up too much time on that right now. Just be aware and be advised. Don't open the doors or windows to let the demons into your life. And it's real easy to do in this day and age when everything is demonic. Everything is demonic. All right, let's read from Jubilees chapter 10. It gives us a great explanation of what happened and who these guys are, what they do, where they came from. I'm going to try to read this real fast because it's kind of long. And in the 3rd week of this Jubilee, the unclean demons began to lead astray the children of the sons of Noah and to make to err and destroy them. And the sons of Noah came to Noah their father, and they told him concerning the demons which were leading them astray and blinding and slaying his sons' sons. And he prayed before Yahweh, his sovereign ruler, and said, Yahweh, of the spirits of all flesh, who have shown mercy unto me, and have saved me and my sons from the waters of the flood, and have not caused me to perish as you did the sons of perdition. Interesting use of the word perdition, because we have the man of perdition in the New Testament, Antichrist. For your free, unmerited pardon has been great towards me, and great has been your mercy to my soul. Let your free, unmerited pardon be lift up upon my sons, and let not wicked spirits rule over them, lest they should destroy them from the earth. But do you bless me and my sons, that we may increase and multiply and replenish the earth. And you know how your watchers, the fathers of these spirits, the watchers of the fallen angels, and you know how your watchers, the fathers of these spirits, acted in my day. And as for these spirits which are living, imprison them, and hold them fast in the place of condemnation, and let them not bring destruction on the sons of your servant, my sovereign ruler, for these are malignant, and created in order to destroy. And let them not rule over the spirits of the living, for you alone can exercise dominion over them. In other words, only God at that time had dominion over them. That power had not been given to Noah yet. And let them not have power over the sons of the righteous from henceforth and forevermore. And Yahweh, our sovereign ruler, bade us to bind all. He gave him the authority to lock them all up. And the chief of the spirits, Mastema, now this is another name for Satan, came and said, Yahweh, Creator, let some of them remain before me, and let them listen to my voice, and do that all that I shall say unto them. For if some of them are not left to me, I shall not be able to execute the power of my will on the sons of men. For these are for corruption and leading astray before my judgment. For great is the wickedness of the sons of men. So see, Satan, the accuser, is also constantly testing us to see if we're going to go the way of the wicked or if we're going to go the way of God. And he said, let the 10th part of them remain before him, and let 9 parts descend into the place of condemnation. That's the abyssal. And one of us he commanded that we should teach Noah all. This is an angel speaking. It's an angel giving this dissertation. And one of us he commanded that we should teach Noah all their medicines, for he knew that they would not walk in uprightness nor strive in righteousness. And we did according to all his words. All the malignant evil ones we bound in the place of condemnation, and a 10th part of them we left, that they might be subject before Satan on the earth. And we explained to Noah all the medicines of their diseases, together with their seductions, how he might heal them with herbs of the earth. And Noah wrote down all the things in a book, as we instructed him concerning every kind of medicine. Thus the evil spirits were precluded from hurting the sons of Noah. And he gave all that he had written to Shem, his oldest son, for he loved him exceedingly above all his sons. And Noah slept with his fathers and was buried on Mount Lubar in the land of Ararat. I want to get into that here pretty quick. The land of Ararat was the Himalayas, I am 100% certain. And the ark rested on Mount Everest, not on Mount Ararat, where we have been led to believe. Okay, so this is what happened. And thank God for the book of Jubilees here in chapter 10 that explains exactly what happened. I suggest you take your time, stop this video, and read through this several times and engrave it into your mind so that you understand how they work. They have fabricated diseases. They have infected when we talk about all these insecticides and fertilizers and things that are in our food, our air, our water, they have done everything, and it began after the flood. That's how long they've been at this game. The important thing to know is only 1/10 of them, however many tens of millions, perhaps hundreds of millions of demons that there are roaming the earth looking to destroy us, it is only the 10th part of them. The other 9/10 are in the abyssal. This just blows me away. I mean, we don't know. We don't know how many there are. In addition, we don't know how many fallen angels that there are. All that we know is that there are very many, and that their leader, they continue to be accountable to Satan, and when they step out of line, they get sent to the abyssal. In one of these videos, I think when we get when I get to work on some demonology, I'm going to explain an event from my own personal life where I was tormented by demons. I thought I was losing my mind. They were in every aspect of my life. Physically, they had manifested physically. And when it all ended, I'll make a short story out of this today, but I'll explain it another time. When it all ended, an angel came to me and explained in my sleep. I was asleep, but it was real. I wasn't dreaming. Explained to me what had gone on, what had happened, and where the demon that was in charge. I think there was more than one, but the one that was in charge of the group of demons that had decided to step out of bounds and come into the physical realm and torment me, had been sent to the abyssal. So when they step out of line, when they push too far, when they go too far, we have the power to call upon the Almighty to send them out of here. Send them to hell where they belong. Some things we need to learn. We have this authority, we have this power, and we don't use it. We're spiritually dead. Again, I keep repeating that, but we're in spiritual darkness. So, I've got one more thing I want to cover. Read this a few times. Make sure it's ingrained in your memory. We need to understand that the fathers of these spirits are the fallen angels who created, what they did in corrupting the genetics of mankind. These illegal spirits, the disembodied spirits of these entities, are what roams the earth today because they have nowhere else to go. God's leaving them here until the final judgment. Not going to be pretty for anybody at that time, but it's just going to be especially ugly for them. Meanwhile, we have authority and dominion over these entities as long as we don't open any doors for them to come into our life. And I'm going to do a complete video at some point, hopefully in the near future, explaining how to keep those doors closed and what to do when we accidentally leave one of them open. And I think I'm going to title it "Don't Feed the Demons." You don't give them anything to feed on, and they don't have any access to you. Okay, one more thing I want to cover, and let's get out of here. So we're at the precipice of the end of this age. All of the signs, I mean, there's so many signs everywhere. The Gog-Magog war, they're crowding in on Israel. The United Nations is wanting to take away the embassy in Jerusalem. Things are cropping up. The rapture could happen at any time. I mean, we know this is the end of the age. So why would I be going so far back in time and trying to straighten this out? Well, for one thing, there's some things I believe that we need to learn to do. One of them is start respecting the Sabbath. The day that we take today is a result of Roman Catholic influence in Christianity, and it's a wrong day. We'll get into more of that later, but there's things that we need to start doing in preparation for this final moment, this rapture of the bride and the 7-day wedding, the feast and everything in heaven. This is all coming very soon, and I'm talking a very, very, very soon, short amount of time it's going to be here. So why would I be going so far back in time? Well, for one thing, we need to understand God's enemy. We need to understand the times. We've lived in darkness, and it's very unfortunate that we've lived in darkness for so long. But we're coming out of the darkness. We're beginning to see. And one of the things that I really want to focus on that we see is Romans chapter 8. And I'm going to read 3 verses from Romans. Read the whole book. Read the whole chapter. But I'm going to read these 3 verses and explain something. Verse 14, for as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, if so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. For the earnest expectation of the creature waiteth for the manifestation of the sons of God. All of creation, since the fall of Adam, has been painfully awaiting the revelation of the sons of God, which is us. This is talking about us. When we finally escape this situation and we're finally redeemed and we're in our redeemed bodies and we become the new sons of God, all of creation, thorns and thistles go away, diseases go away, everything goes back, everything reverts back to the time of Eden before the fall. This is what we're looking forward to. But I also believe, to a very large extent, that so these fallen angels that, as Jude explains, gave up their first habitation, their celestial bodies, God is giving this to us. They're losing, we're gaining. We're going to assume celestial bodies. Now, how many of us there's going to be, I don't know. How many of them there actually was? We know there were 200 on Mount Hermon. We don't know how many there were total, or how many others are considered the sons of God that there are total. We don't know. But they're losing their celestial. They're losing their first habitation. We're aspiring to that same habitation that they gave up. We are going to become the sons of God when all of this ends. I want to end this study with that very positive thought. And I'm going to be working on a new video on the tribe of Dan. It is incredibly interesting and explains so much in history. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get through it, but in the meantime that I'm working through it, I'm going to be putting up some other videos for you to watch. One is a pastor who breaks down in great detail the Illuminati, the Freemasonry, and how they've penetrated every aspect of global leadership around the world. And also there's another, it's called the Order of, I don't want to say too much here, but it's the Order of Jesuits. There's a lot of these secret societies around, and he does a good job of explaining who they are, what they do, how they operate, where to find them, where to look for them, how to avoid them, and all of that. So That's going to wrap this video up. Look forward to some more Chuck Missler and maybe a couple of other pastors meanwhile that I'm working on this tribe of Dan, and we'll get back at it. The reason the tribe of Dan, because I haven't quite finished with Mount Hermon. There's the city of Dan on Mount Hermon, and I think there's a possibility that there could be an Antichrist connection to the tribe of Dan. I want to work through all of that, and then I'm going to present it to you in another video. So thank you, Father, for being with us in this, and look forward to the next one. Hallelujah.
בצאת ישראל ממצרים, בית יעקב מעם לא עז, הייתה יהודה לקודשו, ישראל ממשלותיו. סוב לאחור, הערים רקדו חיילים, גבעות כבד